بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام الأتمان الأكملان على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. Honorable friends, brothers, sisters, mothers, today's webinar, of course, as you are well aware, is about will preparation, why we have to prepare a will, when we have to prepare the will, and how we, of course, prepare the will. Before I start, I'd like to thank Maulana Huzaifa from Siblings of Ilm for allowing us to use his platform to deliver the course. Additionally, I'd like to thank Maulana Ibrahim Noor, a classmate of mine from Coventry, who has prepared a funeral rights booklet covering a lot more issues. And I'd also like to thank I Will Solicitors from Birmingham, who also work in Ilford, London, for giving me free consultation and looking through my slides and making sure that everything that is on these slides is legally watertight. Inshallah, like I answered the previous person's question, we plan to have 2 breaks, one at 12:30, one at 1:30, inshallah. I do want to try to take us through it quite quickly, because the objective of this course is not to become an expert in Islamic will writing. I've been studying it for weeks with lawyers, solicitors, with muftis, and with ulama who have good experience in this field. And I'm by no means an expert, but the little that they've taught me, inshallah, I'd like to pass on, knowing the importance of it. So the contents of this session, or this entire program, is as follows. But before we start, I'd like to go slightly off on a tangent and ask our attendees to recite Surah Al-Ikhlas 3 times for one of my teachers, though he was a temporary teacher, and one of our seniors who used to come to Gloucester every year in the month of Ramadan, Hazrat Maulana Abdul Rahim Falahi. Now he has become Rahmatullahi alayh. He was a great muhsin and a great friend of my father's, and he unfortunately passed away last night after two days of illness. So please take some time, recite 3 times Surah Al-Ikhlas, send the thawab to him, and then we will start, inshaAllah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Right, so this covers the contents of what we will be delivering today, inshallah. Like you can see, it is quite thorough, but it's all about the inheritance and will side of post-death rights. We're not going to go into the final illness. We won't go into ghusl, kafan, dafan, and the entire legal paperwork that you have to complete with the coroners and the doctors, etc. We're not going to speak about ta'ziyat or isal thawab or anything. That is all for a different occasion. You will find information on this. I've put in the further reading right at the end, and you'll get these slides later, inshallah. You can check out Maulana Ibrahim Noor's A Practical Guide to Funeral Rights in Islam book. You can also, especially for the COVID-19 deaths, you can check out the National Burial Council. They've done some fantastic work. And of course, I have to give a disclaimer and say that, look, like I said, I have tried to consult as many relevant people as possible for this, but there might be mistakes there herein. And if there are mistakes, then I ask Allah's forgiveness, and I ask for your mafi and for your forgiveness as well. So I by no means claim that this presentation will keep you legally, legally protected or insured. So I would certainly advise, and I will keep saying it throughout, to go to a solicitor, to go to a mufti, to make sure your Islamic side is perfect and your legal side is perfect, because as is the case with inheritance and will writing, everything changes based on the scenario and based on the individual case of every person. So before we start, this is probably one of the main slides that we'll be covering, because it gives a summary of what happens after death. So if you were to think about the last person we know who passed away, who was quite close to us, we only see normally the janaza and the ghusl. If we're lucky, the ghusl. Otherwise, we just witness the janaza. We don't really witness anything else. but naturally there are a huge number of tasks to be completed, especially financial tasks. So after a person passes away, we have to pay for the funeral and everything else that I've written within these slides. You've got to pay funeral directors if you don't have, anybody locally doing it. Within Gloucester, alhamdulillah, we have Ismail Bayan, the Gloucester Muslim Burial Council, who do a fantastic job, all for free. Sometimes you have to pay for a coffin, sometimes you have to pay for the ghusl as well, to use the masjid's facilities. With COVID deaths now, you have to pay for all the PPE, for all the volunteers, you have to pay for the grave. It actually costs about £2,000 to be buried and to have all your funeral rites done. So when I pass away, my initial payments will be for the funeral expenses, and then priority has to be given to clearing my debts, even if it's things like unpaid bills to companies, even if it's the mahr, the dowry, if there is fidya that needs to be paid for missed acts of worship, I pay all of that. And then the people I want to pay money to, who are within the 1/3 of my will, which is 1/3 of my entire estate, my beneficiaries and my trustees have to then distribute that 1/3 of my entire estate, all of my wealth out, based on how I want to share that money, which is what we'll be covering in these slides, inshallah. And then after all of that, your family members get involved, and your father, son, brother, mother, wife, etc., they then get their shares, which is the remaining 2/3 of your estate. So this is just a very brief overview, just to explain to you that it's not a case of when I die, my son takes everything. There are quite a number of things to be completed beforehand. The certainty of death, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Qur'an 3 times on separate occasions, كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَائِقَةُ الْمَوْتِ, that every soul will taste death. Every soul will taste death. And then the clause after, Allah changes. The one I've chosen today is وَإِنَّمَا تُوَفَّوْنَ أُجُورَكُمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ فَمَنْ زُحْزِحَ عَنِ النَّارِ وَأُدْخِلَ الْجَنَّةَ فَقَدْ فَازَ وَمَا الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا مَتَاعُ الْغُرُورِ. Every soul shall taste death, and indeed you will be given your due rewards on the Day of Judgment. Whoever is saved from the fire and is entered into Jannah, then he is indeed successful. And this dunyawi life, this worldly life, is but a substance of deception. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says again, قُلْ إِنَّ الْمَوْتَ الَّذِي تَفِرُّونَ مِنْهُ فَإِنَّهُ مُلَاقِيكُمْ ثُمَّ تُرَدُّونَ إِلَىٰ عَالِمِ الْغَيْبِ وَالشَّهَادَةِ فَيُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِمَا كُنْتُمْ تَعْمَلُونَ. Say, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, indeed death from which you run, it will come to meet you. And then you will be returned to the one who knows the things of the unseen and things that are visible, and he will tell you about what you have done. And the interesting thing about this ayah is Allah doesn't say ثُمَّ تَرْجِعُونَ, then you will return. Allah says ثُمَّ تُرَدُّونَ, you will be returned, meaning you won't have a choice in the matter. You will have to face Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether you like it or whether you don't. Again, in the next ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the Malakul Maut comes and takes your souls, and then you will be returned to your Rabb. And then finally, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, does insan really think that you've been created without purpose? You've been created bekar, without purpose, and that you won't be returned to your Rabb? Of course, we know we'll be returned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah grant us a beautiful death. May Allah forgive all those who have passed away, and give us long lives with afiyat, and for those we love. Now, inheritances in Islam, or the post-death financial tasks, are dictated to us by the Qur'an and by the Sunnah. And everything that we do as Muslims has to be dictated by the Qur'an and the Sunnah, and in the way the ulama understood the Qur'an and the Sunnah. And interestingly, the entire conversation we'll have today about will writing only covers 1/3 of the dead person's estate, the deceased estate, meaning the money that they leave behind, the property, etc., the wealth that they leave behind. The other 2/3, the deceased person does not have a say where this money goes. The other 2/3, at least, are fixed. And that's for your immediate family members. That's for your brother, that it could be for your brother, it's usually for your son, your daughter, your wife, your parents, etc. And that's a minimum of 2/3. And the 1/3 is a maximum of the choice you have of where you spend that money. Okay, and the reason for this is because Allah doesn't want people to abuse or put their loved ones at a disadvantage. So what would be really quite awful is I have an issue with my brother and he is due to be my only inheritor, but because I don't like him, I want to give 100% of my money to a charity. Allah says, no, you're not allowed to do that. You are only allowed to donate 1/3 to the charity as a maximum, and the remaining must go to your family members. And to corroborate this is a story of Sayyidina Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas radiyallahu ta'ala an, that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam went to visit him one day while he was sick, and he heard that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam he heard, that Sayyidina Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas radiyallahu ta'ala an was intending to give his money in sadaqah, in charity. So Sayyidina Sa'ad radiallahu anhu said, "Oh Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, can I give 2/3 of my property in charity?" Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "No." Sa'ad said, "What about half of my money? Can I give it to charity and leave the other half for my family?" Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "No." Then Sayyidina Sa'ad radiallahu ta'ala and said, "What about 1/3? Give me permission to give 1/3 to charity and I'll leave the rest for my family." Then Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Yes, okay. Ath-thuluth wa thuluthu kathir." Yes, 1/3, but even 1/3 is a lot. It is a maximum. And then he gave a really beautiful principle. He says that it is better for you to leave your beneficiaries, your family members, your progenies, your offspring wealthy, independent. It is better you do this than you leave them poor, poverty-stricken, so they are left opening their hands, asking from other people. So if we have money, then naturally our family members should be the ones who benefit from it the most. And I just want to bring to attention a scholar who lived in the 1900s. He was a non-Muslim, Professor Amarik Ramzi of King's College London, and he was a master in inheritance law, and he'd studied Islamic inheritance law. And his comment as a non-Muslim was that the Islamic law of inheritance comprises beyond question the most refined and elaborate system of rules for the devolution of property that is known to the civilized world. All of the accusations that are leveled against Islam and Muslims for having unfair distribution of inheritance, this professor knows what he's talking about. He says that there is no better way. Islam takes into consideration the holistic view of humans and the different dependents people have, and who is expected to care for whom, so who should get more than others, etc. The Qur'an also makes mention of will writing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Baqarah that it is enjoined and made farad upon you, wajib upon you, that when death approaches any one of you, in taraka khayran al-wasiyyatu lil-walidayn, if he were to leave wealth, to do a wasiyah, to give a will to parents, to relatives, as is normal, haqqan ala al-muttaqeen. This is necessary, this is a duty upon those who are righteous, upon those who fear the displeasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, will writing, meaning, I've said this before, you're going to have to get used to me saying this, when you voluntarily write a will, that cannot go to family members. Okay, not immediate family members anyway, who are due to be inheritors. It could go to extended family members who won't be inheritors, but it can't go to your inheritors. So this ayah was made mansukh, meaning it was cancelled out by the ayat in Surah An-Nisa. If you are hafid, you've done hifd temporarily, you will know yusikumullahu fi awladikum lidhakari mithlu hadh al-unthayn, some of the hardest ayat of the Qur'an for huffaz to remember. So in yusikumullahu fi awladikum, Allah stipulates beautifully every type of scenario, and then within that scenario, meaning if there is for example, Allah give me a long healthy life and protect me and protect the soul. If I were to pass away and I have a wife, how much does she get? What if I have a child? How much would my wife get in that instance? So the Quran discusses all of this in great detail, and the importance of writing a will is mentioned in this ayah. And the Hadiths are very explicit and very emphatic. Sayyidina Abdullah bin Umar radiyallahu ta'ala and says, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that it is not right for a Muslim that if they have something to give wasiyah for, that they spend 2 nights without having their wasiyah and their will written. Just understand this for a second, right? I was going to do a show of hands, but this is an online webinar, so we can't do it, of how many people actually have written a will, or have even had a conversation about it, have even brought it Abdullah bin Umar heard this from Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and this was the passion and the zeal of the Sahaba. He said that a night did not pass since hearing this hadith, that not one night passed except that I had my wasiyah written by me. Meaning I had it written immediately once I heard this hadith. And inshallah, what I want to impress on us today is as a minimum, what we should do after today's webinar is not become experts and start giving people advice about how to write a will exactly, but to at least make preparations within ourselves, at least start having discussions, at least ask for a template, maybe get in touch with the solicitors. This is inshallah the objective of today. Another hadith mentions about from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam how it's very important to be fair when donating money in your will. Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala narrates that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that a person could be in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for 60 years of their life, and death were to come to the man or to the woman, but in their wasiyah, in their will, they have intended to cause harm to somebody, Allah makes Jahannam, the fire, wajib for them. Just think about that for a second. You spent your whole life trying to get close to Allah. At the time of your death, you want to cause harm to somebody with your will, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says Jahannam becomes wajib for you. And then another hadith, a variation of this hadith says for 70 years, a person, if he were to be in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he were to make a will which oppresses somebody, then it is written for him to be evil, and of course he will be a dweller of Jahannam, at least temporarily. But a person could have spent 70 years in goodness in this life, in evil in this life, doing the ma'asiyah and the disobedience of Allah, death were to come to him, but in his wasiyah, this man or this woman were fair in their wasiyah, in their will, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will write a beautiful entrance for him into Jannatul Firdaus. So this is the importance of writing a will, the importance of being fair. Just because we don't talk about it enough doesn't mean it's not important. Unfortunately, the ulama are to blame as much as everybody else, that we should really be speaking more about this. And if the dini aspect of it doesn't motivate you enough, then inshallah, what I'm going to tell you now will. If we do not prepare our will properly, meaning if we don't do it with the guidance of muftis and with the guidance of solicitors, we could end up giving away 40% of our wealth to the taxman. 40% is the rate of inheritance tax. Just think about that for a second. Over and above £325,000. So we must be very, very careful about making sure that we have a will written. And this page just contains some stats you can read, that people only really start talking about inheritance after they've had a near-death experience, or like in situations that we find ourselves in, like in COVID, when people find out their friends, relatives, close ones are passing away or becoming very sick, and we've realized slightly too late the temporary nature of this world, the temporary nature of this life. Now people are starting to think about it. Alhamdulillah, it's better, of course, late than never. Okay. Why should we write a will, and why now? Why did we not have this seminar years earlier? I can't answer that question, unfortunately. But with the rising death toll of COVID, we should have been prepared anyway. But now, especially, we should be prepared because we are seeing healthy, wealthy, young people passing away. And unfortunately, the reality is many of us don't even know what we own. So if I were to ask you a question, who owns the sofas in your house? Could you answer it? Because you need to answer it. Because that will determine what your estate is worth. Especially if you have £2,000 or £3,000 sofas in your house, that's a lot of money. I might ask you, okay, people will know who owns the house. People might know who owns the car. But the phone that you are using, who owns it? Has your husband bought it for you? If you're a woman, has your husband bought it for you and you're just using it, or has he made you the malik of it? Things like this we have to really understand, because it will come into play after we pass away. And if you were to die without writing a will, not only could you lose 40%, but things will be done un-Islamically, and that's a bigger problem. Okay, 40%, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will inshallah give you more in Jannah if you at least left an Islamic will. But if you die without an Islamic will, and it is distributed un-Islamically, the person who passes away bears the full responsibility in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we must be very, very, very careful. And of course, we don't want to be the means of family members fighting, having disputes. And if you don't leave a will, nobody's going to give you money in charity. So it's really important we write a will. And it's not as difficult as people think it is. Some people might think, oh yeah, actually I won't do it yet because I'm busy, too many commitments. If I fall sick and I realize that, oh, it might be a terminal illness, or Allah save and protect us all, Allah give us afiyat. But if somebody finds out they have cancer, then they're like, oh, I've got to start taking this seriously. Any will which is written last minute meaning in your final death, in your final illness, the illness after which there is no going back. Basically, you've passed the point of no return, where doctors have said, we don't really have much hope he's going to recover from this illness. If we get to this final illness without writing a will, and in that final illness we want to write a will, those wills will not be binding by Sharia. Even a gift you give according to the law of the country won't be binding. Therefore, it is imperative we write our will beforehand, especially in the current climate of COVID, etc. People are falling sick, suddenly going to hospital for a couple of weeks, and unfortunately, many people are passing away. Like, there's a really beautiful hadith Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says about the best type of sadaqah. He says the best sadaqah is the one where you give sadaqah where you desire wealth. So, because when we give away our wealth at the time of death, we're only giving it away because we've got no option anyway. But if you write your will when you're quite young, and when you've got a lot of money, and you've got this greed to own properties and to become the richest man in the city, and to do more than your friends have done in the financial world, when you give sadaqah like that, and when you write a will like that, that's what's really meaningful. So inheritance tax, this is all for solicitors. I'll just give you a quick overview of it, having spoken to a few solicitors. Inheritance tax, known as IHT, is payable at a rate of 40% of all wealth over £325,000 for a single person and £650,000 for a couple, and they share the 650,000. They share the 650,000. Okay, so for example, if the husband uses 250, the allowance, tax-free allowance in his life, then his wife will have 400 left when she passes away. It's not a case of he has 325, she has 325, and that's it. They share the 650. So if he uses 250, she uses the remaining 450. They're allowed to do that. Okay. There is also a new tax-free allowance which came in into law in 2017 or 18, I believe. And it's called the RNRB, and that's a direct descendant tax-free allowance for the main residence. Okay, so if your dad owns the home and he's giving it to his son, then that won't be taxed, and you get an extra £125,000, £175,000 or so. But again, for this, really important that we speak to solicitors. Okay, I just want to really push you to write a will today, or to at least make an intention to write a will today. So the inheritance tax should scare us, especially if our family members have quite a bit of wealth. In reality, all you need to do is own a house in London, and you've probably passed this threshold anyway. So it's really, really important, especially if our loved ones own a lot of wealth. As an inheritor, why should the 40% that I was due go to the taxman? It makes no sense. So I should be pushing my mum and my dad, my brothers and my sisters, to make sure that they are properly writing a will, to make sure that the taxman doesn't benefit when I could benefit instead. And if we don't plan our wills properly, this is from Brother Rizwan at I Will Solicitors, he says that you could lose the tax-free allowance, okay, and it might just it might be rendered invalid or ineffective. I'll try to explain this to you. It is quite technical, okay? And some of this might be quite technical. You're just going to have to bear with me. I'm sorry, this isn't like an entertaining talk about Jannah or Jahannam. This is a technical fiqhi and legal webinar, so it will be full of quite a bit of legal jargon and Islamic fiqh jargon as well. So take, for example, there are a married couple. Now the married couple, their allowance, tax-free allowance, is £650,000. After they die, £650,000 will not be taxed. This could be rendered invalid or ineffective if you count it as two separate 325,000. How? Let's say I own £450,000 as an example. Okay, I die first, and the taxman, he forgives 325. He says to my wife, you can take that money. Not to my wife, that's a bad example, because if it goes to spouse, then there's no inheritance at all. But let's say my wife's not alive, then it goes to my children. The taxman will say £325,000 we will forgive. The remaining 125, unfortunately, you will have to pay 40% tax on. That means my family members, my sons, are losing out on 40% of £125,000. That's £50,000. That is £50,000 they're losing out on. That's half a house if you go and live somewhere in the north, right? That's a lot of money. Now, the way they could lose out some more is on the second spouse's death, who doesn't have much in terms of assets, so they only utilize, say, £100,000 of their allowance. They actually left behind £225,000 of the tax-free allowance. And that £225,000 could have been used by me when I died, okay? And if I would have used the 225 that my wife was going to leave unused anyway, then my children would not have had to sacrifice anything for the taxman. So it's really important that we understand how to write this will to protect us. If you don't write a will, then the law of, what do you call it? Intestacy comes by, which basically means that the government will decide where your money goes according to English law. And it can get quite scary from a Muslim's perspective, because Islam tells us what to do. And if we are not preparing our will, and it goes to people who Sharia otherwise wouldn't give us the right to give to, or it deprives those who according to Sharia would be given a share, then that is with us in our grave. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take into account that we have just deprived a human being of their haqq. And when you violate the rights of a human being, when you violate the haqq of a Muslim, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it becomes personal between the two of you. And Allah will not deal with you and will not forgive you until the matter between the both of you is solved. So we must be really, really careful that we make sure that we write these wills properly and we take the advice of solicitors. Right. Avoiding inheritance tax is legal. It's in the inheritance law textbooks. Lawyers and solicitors actually learn about this, I've been told by the guys at IWIL. So everything's legal, they're allowed to. And I read a really funny quote from a politician who lived in or who was in office in the 1980s. And he said that inheritance tax is a voluntary tax that you give to the taxman because you hate the taxman less than you hate your family members. And you didn't write a will because you wanted to deprive your family members, and knowing that that money was going to a taxman. So we are allowed to avoid trying to give inheritance tax within legal remits, of course. Again, speak to a solicitor for legal advice. Okay. What's really important, what's really interesting is there's a concept in will writing called leaving a trust, where when you leave a trust, you're not directly giving the money to family members already. You're keeping it in like a pot, and that pot doesn't get taxed. And then after a few years, I think 7 or 8 years, you can then distribute that wealth to people and it won't be taxed. So it's very, very interesting, and your solicitor will be able to help you with this. Right. Sorry. The Islamic will template now. Okay. So now I've given you a brief overview of the Islamic will. I see that there are 5 questions and answers. I'll just answer them before we start this new topic. I've colored the will, I've colored the slide so that we can, move from one topic to the other. How old do you have to try to write a will? Over 18. Once you're over 18, even when you're 16 or so, once you become baligh, Islamically you can write a will. Okay, once you become baligh, once you are 14, 15 years of age, for girls slightly younger, write a will. It won't really be, it won't be legally binding, but once you turn 18, it'll be legally binding, and it's just topping up your will. Okay, so I've just answered that one. Regarding the hadith about not waiting 2 nights to write a will, doesn't the beginning of the hadith make it clear that it's only if you intend to bequest something to others in the first place? Doesn't this seem to suggest that it's not farad for those who don't particularly intend on leaving a will and are happy for it all to go to funeral costs and inheritance? Yes, that's right. So if you don't want to leave any wills, you don't want to leave any money to a charity, you don't want to give it to any other person, not to a masjid, not for your own sadaqah jariyah, and you want to just leave all your money for inheritance, then Islamically, you don't have to write a wasiyah, but legally within British law, you will have to write a will. Okay, so although it's not farad to write a wasiyah, you will have to write a will within English law. Otherwise, what will happen is they will distribute it how they like. Okay, what happens if one passes away? Does the inherit tax-free allowance automatically transfer to one's spouse? If one passes away, does the inheritance tax-free allowance? Well, no, it'd be used on you. So if as much as is used on you will be deducted, and the rest will go to your spouse. How does a taxman know if your wealth is shared between the spouses or it belongs to them individually? Because you're meant to write this down. And legally, we have technically what will happen is there'll be a dispute in the court of law. If there's a fight in the court of law, if there's a fight between family members, it will be a dispute taken to the court of law, and then it will get really, really messy between family members, and that's how they will then judge who owned what, especially with big things like houses, etc. So somebody could say to his wife, "Oh, you own half the house, but it's not on paper anywhere. You've got a problem. It's not on paper." If the wife then, after the husband passes away, says, "Oh, but he told me I owned half the house," and the son's like, no, but it's not on paper, and it goes to the court of law, then we've got a problem there. So that's why it's really important, and it's coming in the second half of the presentation. We'll speak about writing down every single thing that you own, so that it's made very, very clear. Can a will be fairly generic, so it doesn't need to be topped up or modified as time goes on? Yes, absolutely. It can be quite generic. So the way I've prepared a template is just a template, but you can just keep adding rows and columns to it for every extra thing you own or every other charity you want to change. And then every time you change it, just put a little signature on it with the date on. We're also going to talk about that later as well, inshaAllah. And I've been to a number of solicitors who all say different things. Can you recommend a good solicitor who understands the Sharia perspective as well as how to avoid IHT? There is nobody better in my eyes who I've dealt with. There might be other people who've dealt with others. I would definitely suggest going to I Will Solicitors. I'll put up their website later as well, inshallah. Fantastic brothers, Brother Harun, Brother Rashid from Birmingham. They're the only solicitors who I know of in the country, maybe it's changed now, who only deal with inheritance, and especially Islamic laws of inheritance and wills. And they take advice from Mufti Faraz Adam from Leicester, an acquaintance of mine who studied by Mufti Ibrahim Desai in South Africa. Right. What if property is joint owned with one of your relatives? Then that's it. Then it's joint owned. Just have a paper trail of it. It doesn't have to be your friends and family, your immediate friends and family who own it. It can be a distant relative as well. That's no problem. Then in your asset identifier, you'll just have to write it down that this person owns it with me. This question has come from Canada. I would really like to, I should have said this at the beginning actually, please forgive me. The legal side of all of this, meaning the law side of it all, the legislative side of it all, is according to English law. The legislative side of it, like inheritance tax amounts, etc., will differ from country to country. I don't know of any good solicitors in Canada, but if you're from Toronto, I would suggest speaking to the ulama at Darus Salam or in Masjid Abu Bakr in Scarborough. I have friends there, and mashallah, they're very active, and they should be able to help you, inshallah. And Salam, is it 1/3 of the entire wealth or after the funeral costs and debts? That's for the will. It's 1/3 after the immediate costs. So 1/3 after the funeral costs. Okay. Last one. I have been informed that if I die without a will, my tax-free allowance will transfer to my wife. She will own the house, and my assets, the value of the house is 500k. Does this mean that when she passed away, my children will have a combined tax-free exemption of 650k, which will mean that they have no IHT to pay? My God, that's a lot in one question. She will own the house and my assets. The value of the house is 500k. Does this mean that when she passes away, my children will have a combined tax-free? I'm not too sure. That question seems a bit too complicated for me. And if I don't know the answer, I will raise my hands and say, I don't know. It's from the integrity, inshallah, of the ulama that we don't know the answer, we say, I don't know. That seems like quite a specific question. That's a question for a solicitor. Inshallah, they'll be able to help you with that. I'm really sorry, I can't give you the answer. Can I please clarify something? If the joint IHT is after 650, then if one spouse dies and the other 625 to transfer to the other spouse, yes, according to my understanding, this is what happens. It transfers to the other spouse. You can confirm with a solicitor and I will happily be corrected, inshallah. My understanding is it transfers to the other spouse. That's what I've been told by the people I've spoken to. If one is married Islamically but not according to English law, does that mean your wife is not your spouse for purpose of inheritance distribution if no will is made? This is a very, very interesting question by Zach Bay, because recently there has been a massive debate within Parliament about how we should recognize those people who are not legally married. Now, if somebody is not legally married, but they've been long-term partners, and let's say they were to miss out completely, if you weren't to leave a will, they were to miss out completely because they weren't your legal spouse, then they would have the full right to take it to the, and you didn't write a will, then they could probably take it to the English courts and they might actually get something. I know of recent cases that have happened that have been quite famous. You can probably search it up as well. That is coming in the news that what's happened is they've been long-term partners for 20 years, for example, without getting married, and then the wife says, well, that's not really fair. And same with divorce as well, or breakups of relationships, where she says, I lived with him for so many years, even though we weren't married legally, surely I should get something. They'll probably go to a court if we do not leave an Islamic will. So that's why it's really important we leave an Islamic will, especially for that scenario. There's a Kabe. Is it all the items in the house? I would think so. Unless you have like an understanding, where understanding meaning like a paper trail understanding, and you say, right, the house and everything within it is split 50-50. That is probably easiest, meaning it's probably the simplest thing to do, to write down. But in terms of technicalities, my goodness, it's quite difficult. But that probably is the simplest way of doing it. If, it's co-owned, if the house is co-owned. And does the British law recognize the Islamic law inheritance as mentioned in the Qur'an? No, it does not. If you write a will, it will go according to your will. Now, your will be according to the Quranic law, and the government, or not the government, the courts will accept your will if it follows Islamic law. But if you just die and your family members say, oh, she was a Muslim and she should have, her inheritance should be split Islamically, the court of law will say, no, this is England and it'll be split according to English law, unless they have left a will which explicitly states that it should be split Islamically. Okay, really important. Right, the Islamic will template. So the template, I'm going to send you a template after anyway, as part of the course notes, inshallah. So I'm not going to go through every single thing in detail. Okay, this is just going to be a guide. The will consists of about 10 to 11, maybe more, different aspects. Okay, we're going to go through it one by one quite quickly. I don't want to spend too much time on this, okay, because there's no point, because you're going to see it in front of you and you're going to read it all anyway. So there's not much point going through everything in a lot of detail. I'll explain what the words mean to you. Okay, so to revoke means to take something back, to cancel. So on your will, you'll start your will, and I'll give you this template, inshallah, the one I've written. You can amend it as you like, okay? That's completely up to you. This is just I've used the template used by first Ethico and by the Islamic Academy of Coventry, and I've kind of adapted it to fit the the laws of 2020. So you'd write your full name, you'd write your address, maybe even your date of birth. If you want, write your passport number, so there's no doubt who it is, especially for someone like me in Gloucester. I'm Abdullah Patel. There are two other Abdullah Patels in Gloucester. I used to live on a street with another Abdullah Patel, and that could really confuse things, because technically we are both Abdullah Patels. We both live on, a certain road. Whose is it, right? Obviously my family will know it's mine, his family will know it's his, but just basically this is just to identify you properly. Okay. So the first step is to revoke all your previous wills and any previous testaments that you've made. And why this is important is you might have promised somebody something verbally without knowing, and they might have written it down or something. So you just say, look, whatever I've done in the past is cancelled. This is fresh. This is new. Everything before doesn't count. And you declare your faith. Declaration of faith is just ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, but you make it clear within your will. Within this part of the will, I say it's also really important to add in nasiha to family members about, and this is really, really important. Obviously money, we love money, right? Money is really important. Your wealth, your property is very important, the estate you own. But nasiha to family members. I actually saw a will written by a family member, and I'm not sure I was meant to see it, but I saw it accidentally, and in there was advice written to saying, beta, you should do this and you should do that, and you should stay away from this and stay away from that, and go to sit in the company of a Shaykh, etc., etc. So this is really important for nasiha to family members. In the previous times, what would happen is the family members would literally hire people to cry. They would hire women to come in and to cry and, to mourn and to grieve and to lament over the person's death. And this is why Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says in a hadith, Al-Mayyit la yu'adhab bi bukai ahlihi alayh, that the Mayyit is the person who is deceased, who is lying in his grave, is being punished because his family members are crying over him. Not crying as in the human natural crying, but because they have invited others to come and mourn and make a big scene, and just not genuine crying, basically fake crying to try to put on a show. Now if you were to write a nasiha in your will and say, look, do not do this, do not do anything at the time of my burial, at the time of my janazah, during my ghusl, which contradicts sharia, make sure that everything is done according to Islam, then inshaAllah, even if your family members go rogue and they do what they want and they violate the laws of Sharia, if you have written it in your will and these are the teachings you have passed down to them in your life, we have great hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He will protect you from punishment because of the actions of your loved ones. So it's very important. And it was a sunnah of Sayyidina Yaqub alayhi salatu wassalam. In Surah Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Yaqub alayhi salam, إِذْ حَضَرَ يَعْقُوبَ الْمَوْتِ إِذْ قَالَ لِبَنِيهِ مَا تَعْبُدُونَ مِنْ بَعْدِهِ. Before he was about to pass away, he asked his children, who are you going to worship after I pass away? He's testing their iman. And this was like a nasiha that he was giving to them. So this should also be written in the will. Obviously, you could just copy this or add certain specific things in which you like. For example, it might be the case that, your father used to sweep the masjid every Thursday, and part of his nasiha to you as his child is to say, beta, when I pass away, I want you to take over this. I want it to run in our family that we are the cleaners of the masjid. So it might be something very specific. You can change it as you like. Okay. And then you speak about funeral wishes. Again, there's a template here which you will see when I send you the course notes, inshallah. Make it explicitly clear that you want the Islamic rites of the janazah, of the funeral. Really important, especially with something like with the COVID issue right now, with the cremation issue going through Parliament. I know it's been deferred or it's been changed slightly, so inshallah, we're protected. Even if it's something like autopsies or post-mortems, now in some places, I know in Oxford and Gloucester, we have access to a MRI scan instead of certain types of post-mortems. Others, you have to go for a post-mortem. But in many cases now, we can get away with an MRI scan, which costs £800 or so. I can't remember the exact amount. But you might also want to write that down to say, look, I don't want them to use it. Even if it's things like organ donations, you can say that I don't want my organs donated. You can also write that down here. That's a discussion for another day. We don't have time for that right now. Inshallah, that's a conversation we can have with Mufti Zubair Bhatt and Mona Yunus Dudwala and others, inshallah. As part of your will, I would also heavily recommend writing down your missed acts of worship. If you've, let's say because of an illness, because Ramadan is coming up, Allah save, protect us all. Let's say that our family members fall sick because of any type of illness. Doesn't just have to be COVID, and they're unable to fast, or they might be pregnant and they're unable to fast, or asthmatic and in the summer they're unable to fast. I know somebody who was unable, well, they had to break their fast every day during the summer months because of asthma, because it was just impossible for them. So if you have missed fasts, missed salahs, number one priority is make it up in your lifetime. Let's not even talk about putting it in the will. Let's make it up in our lifetime. But if I don't have enough time to make it in my lifetime, I've made a plan, but you know what, unfortunately Allah took me before my plan finished, then write it down. Write down what you missed, how many of it you missed, and the fidya. Fidya amount is approximately, it changes, literally changes day by day, approximately about £3, okay, for every act of worship. And if you have Hajj that needs to be completed, when Hajj is farad on you and you refuse to do it because you're like, no, I want to go for 3 weeks, I only get 2 weeks off because of work. So unfortunately, that's not a valid excuse. Okay, you can still go Hajj for 2 weeks. It's just that you wanted to go for 3 weeks, or you wanted to take your mom and your dad with you, or you wanted to take your wife and your children with you, but it was farad on you and you should have gone. If you didn't go, then your family should arrange for Hajj Badal. This is explicit in a hadith from Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Same with zakat and qurbani, etc. If you think I'm rushing through this, don't worry about it. Everything will be given to you on paper, inshallah. So don't worry about me rushing through it. Guardianship. This is a really interesting one. You're probably thinking, what's the point of this? Now, remember, if you have children under the age of 18, you must fill in this document. You must. And if you don't, you will be the means of huge family disputes. Okay? I want to give you a scenario. Allah save and protect us all. A family of 4 are traveling in their car. Listen to this scenario very carefully. A family of 4 are traveling in their car. Husband and wife and 2 children. The husband and wife, unfortunately, have an accident, pass away. One of the children also passes away with them. One of the children remains alive. Now, that child who has remained alive has lost his mother and his father. That child has a paternal set of grandparents and a maternal set of grandparents, dada dadi and nana nani. Now, dada dadi, paternal grandparents, come forward and say, we want the child. Maternal grandparents, nana nani, come forward and say, we want the child. What happens? The courts will look into the will. Who did the parents write should be the legal guardian of this child in the event of death? Unfortunately, they found that nothing was written in their will. You know what will happen? Dada dadi on one side, nana nani on the other side will go to a court of law, and they will have it out in a court of law if they can't reach an understanding within themselves of custody. So this is why it's really important to avoid family disputes in the event that both were to pass away simultaneously or very close to one another. Make sure you write down guardians. You don't have to write down just 1 or 2. I would suggest at least 2, and after 2 maybe you write down more in case it's like a crazy scenario, like somebody were to pass away or a family were traveling together including grandparents in a plane. Allah save and protect everybody. This is quite gory actually, but let's say multiple people in the family were to pass away, then who? Okay, really important that you write down who would be guardian of the under 18 children. We have about 5 minutes or so left till the break. I'll just try to shoot through the contents of the will, inshallah. Appointing executors and trustees. This is one of the most important parts of the will, okay? Because these executors and trustees are people who you are going to trust to fulfill your will according to your wishes. So you've got to make sure these people are absolutely trustworthy. And that they aren't going to try to manipulate your will to benefit from it personally. Really important. Okay, if you have even a shadow of a doubt over somebody, my recommendation would be do not risk it. Only give it to people who you would literally trust with your life, and they should be obviously over 18 so they can understand. You can appoint as many as you want, but the more you appoint, the messier it becomes. So I would suggest two, and they would have equal power, and they would make sure that you get it done yourself. Like, I'll give you a simple example of where people might dispute. It's a very small example, a very trivial example. Let's say you write in your will that you write it vague. I want a water well built. Okay. Now, one of your trustees, the people you trust to execute your will, works for a charity, and his charity have water wells for £800. Okay. And the other executor, his partner who you've put as a trustee, doesn't work for a charity, but says, I know someone who does it for £200. Now, I think I know what's going to happen. The guy who owns a charity will say, you know what, give it to mine for 800 because it benefits his charity. And the other guy will say, no, make it 200. So you want somebody that you completely trust, okay? Ideally trustworthy family members. And for those who are made executors or trustees of a will, Allah says in the Qur'an, gives a very, very stern warning. فَمَنْ بَدَّلَهُ بَعْدَ مَا سَمِعَهُ فَإِنَّمَا إِثْمُهُ عَلَى الَّذِينَ يُبَدِّلُونَهُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ. Then whoever, meaning is responsible for the will, then changes whatever they have heard or whatever they have read in the will, then the sin is on the people who have changed it. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hears all and sees all. And the executor, these are just a list of roles that they do. You can find it online as well, inshallah. Right. The residuary estate is the taraka, whatever is left. Okay. After immediate costs. So after you've paid your funeral expenses, your debts, after you've paid fidya, after you've executed the will, it's whatever is left. Now, what is very important for the standard provisions for the executors and trustees, you will see a part of the will which says standard provisions. Here it is. Okay, the one by First Ethical and Mullah Ibrahim Noor contain first edition. You can still have first edition, but the law has changed in 2011, so I would recommend putting in the second edition. Standard provisions is basically, in simple words, it is giving permission to your trustees and executors to fulfill your will according to their understanding of what you've written. So it's not, you're basically telling them, don't try to go into that really nitty gritty of every little thing. There's, I can understand that my trustees, they know what I'm talking about when I write it. It's specific enough, but it might be slightly vague, and I trust them to basically take care of it. So let's say your money were to then go into a trust, okay? It doesn't get distributed immediately. Let's say you decide, I want to put that money into a trust. These trustees will be responsible for that pot of money, okay? So the standard provision says things like they will have permission on where to invest that money, how to use that money, when to distribute it to your family members. This is the control the trustees and executors have, and standard provisions gives them this control. It is basically a paragraph. It says that, it's a whole document actually. I put it in a paragraph, which says that according to common sense and according to our common understanding, this is how you should use my money. But a really important additional thing I've put in is, it's really important that we add into our will as part of standard provisions that anything that you, or any place you will put the money, must be Sharia compliant. So if you want to invest it, do not invest in any haram funds or any haram stocks or shares. Do not invest it in somewhere where I'll have to accrue interest or give interest. Okay, really important, this part of standard provisions. And if you don't do this, again, the person who dies will be sinful in the eyes of Allah, because you should have given this command. And then at the end of it, the executors and trustees will sign the document to say, yes, we were there. You will sign it yourself, okay? And the signature of all three of you at least must be done in the same majlis. It can't be done, I'll sign it, then I'll go to Ibrahim's house and he'll sign it, then I'll go to Ahmed's house and he'll sign it. No, all three have to be together and we sign it together. According to Sharia, it's not faraz or wajib to have two witnesses. However, it is recommended because it saves you from disputes later after demise. Okay, according to English law, it must be written and you must have two independent witnesses, and ideally witnesses who are not beneficiaries to the will. Okay, so beneficiaries meaning shouldn't be son, daughter, mother, father, wife, husband. If brothers and sisters are going to inherit because you don't have children, then it shouldn't be them. Nor should people married to them, because obviously if you're married to somebody's son, then your father-in-law might say, right, my daughter-in-law will do it, but you will benefit because your husband will benefit, and then because of your husband benefiting, you will benefit. So it shouldn't be anybody married to them either. Okay, it should all be done in one majlis. If a witness were to pass away before your death, you don't have to change the names of the witness. It can still go on, but I would definitely recommend you update the witnesses, right? Just make another copy of the will, and then have another 2 witnesses at the same time sign it with you. What I will do is we'll take a break here, and then we'll carry on in 5 minutes, inshallah. So we'll be back at 12:30. 5:36, inshallah. In the meantime, I'll try to write some answers for you. Assalamu alaikum. So yeah, I'm just answering these questions. I know there are people who probably want more than 5 minutes. I'm just trying to answer all these questions. Can trustees be beneficiaries? Yes, they can. As a follow-on question, if a husband and wife die so close together, like a matter of minutes apart, does the one who dies later inherit from the former? Yes. Okay. If it's simultaneous, then that's confusing. Then you go to a mufti for that specific case. But even then, they determine who was first, who was second. If it's very close together, let's say like half a day apart or something, then let's say dad dies first, and the mum dies half a day later. Dad's inheritance will be shared. Like it'd be obviously the money won't be given to mum's account straight away, but it'd be considered that she inherited from him, and when she passes away, hers would be shared. Is cash considered part of Islamic will? Yes, absolutely. Unfortunately, hiding money under the mattress doesn't work for Islamic wills. Unfortunately, my fidya for Miss Salah over 40 years equates to over 200k. I'm trying to make it, but I'm very weak now. If I pass away, my inheritance will be left with nothing. They'd have to sell the house and give child payment fidya. Are they sinful payment fidya as a loser on the whole estate? Fidya should come from your estate if you are sincerely making those salah up. Can a parent stipulate that instead of selling the house, children put the house on rent and share the income according to Islamic law? But if some children put it on rent and others want it sold, then what is to be done in that instance? Okay, so according to Islamic, let me answer this because I can't, it's just too long to write down. So parents can only distribute the house according to Islamic law. Okay, so what's important here is that if they want to be unfair in their distribution, unfair meaning according to Islamic law, let's say they have 2 sons and a daughter and they say you should all get 1/3 each. Islam doesn't recognize that. However, and this is I think the answer to your question, if the brothers and sisters together say, you know what, that's what dad wanted, and the 2 brothers who should be getting more, they forfeit whatever they think that they should get according to Islamic law. They say, you know what, Ben, you know what, sister, take our share as well, and let's fulfill dad's wishes. Then that's fine. They're allowed to do that. But every single inheritor has to agree to it. If let's say there are 5 brothers and 5 sisters, and even one of them doesn't agree to an equal share, it won't happen. Okay, then what will happen is give him his share, and the others between themselves, now that they are owners of it, they can sort it out between themselves, is give a hadiyah or a gift to one another, but it won't be considered part of the Islamic inheritance. So in that scenario, the boys will all get their double shares, girls will all get, or sisters will get their single shares. The one who doesn't want to share his money, put him to the side, and the rest of us, you don't have to, but we can make an agreement within ourselves and say, oh yeah, you know what, the daughters, you lot did lots of khidmat and service of our parents, so we'll give you our share. You can do that whatever you like after your parents' demise. Okay, that's just gifting. Right. In a scenario where a husband and wife are married with several children, if the house belongs to the husband, is it compulsory on him to dissolve the property and distribute the wealth of Sharia inheritance and potentially leave the wife and children homeless? I don't understand that. Who is an acceptable to pass on the house after the husband's passing? You see, according to Islamic law, his wife and his children would benefit. So they wouldn't be rendered homeless because they would actually be, and this is why the 2/3 law exists, right? The 2/3 law exists because the whole point is that your children shouldn't be left homeless. So even if he writes a will, that would only be 1/3. And then if he's worried that other people might inherit according to Islam, then nobody will inherit more than his children or his wife anyway. Maybe his parents, but definitely not enough to take the entire house away from the children. If the deceased instructs in his will for his body to be transported abroad after death, is it an Islamic obligation to carry out? No. And the 1/3 would be taken out, but the person would be sinful. It would be taken out of the will side, the 1/3, but the person would be sinful, unfortunately. In the in the template that I've prepared, it says in the closest cemetery to where I have passed away. We shouldn't be transporting bodies anyway, especially in the way it's being transported nowadays, with injected with alcohol, etc., and the delay in the janazah, delay in the ghusl, etc. We should really not be going there. So if they want to fulfill it, it's up to them. The deceased will be sinful, and I would definitely not recommend it. They should speak to a mufti before doing it, really take it into consideration. Can the executors of the will and the witnesses be the same people? No, I would say don't do that. Absolutely not. Because you risk, then what you've essentially done is you've put all of your eggs in one basket. Okay, you've made your neighbor the beneficiary, you've made your neighbor a trustee of the will, and you've made him a witness to the will. So essentially you've given him full and utter control, and as a witness he could testify to whatever he likes. It can work if the person is trustworthy enough, but I can't really give a recommendation. I'm not too sure about that, to be honest. It all depends on how trustworthy you think the people are. Who would you recommend as trustees, executors? I don't know your family well enough, Brother Muhammad, so I can't answer that question, but somebody who you trust, maybe your children, if they don't have dispute within themselves. Ideally somebody slightly younger, so based on, not obviously Allah can give us death whenever he likes, right, but based on people who we think might have a longer life, then give it to them so they can actually distribute it, because distribution of wealth could take up to about 12-18 months. Okay, inshallah it can be shorter sometimes it even longs out beyond them, to the extent that I know of families genuinely where generations have passed, 2 or 3 generations have passed, and the wealth still hasn't been distributed, and now there's a huge problem finding out who gets what because who died first, and it's just a huge puzzle now that we don't know how to solve. So I would recommend somebody slightly younger and somebody you trust fully, somebody you would trust to give money to in your lifetime, put it that way. Okay, I have people in my life who I can trust, I can give money to in my lifetime and say, you know what, I 100% trust him to give that money back to me. Even if it's £20,000, I trust him to give it back to me. Somebody like that. What if they have no money left? Fidya equals a large amount due to the fidya amount, then family members should do tawbah for this person, and this person should be tawbah before he passes away. There's not really much we can do about that. The family are not obliged to pay on their father's behalf. What if they disagree on either to rent it out or sell it to share? If they disagree, then look, Islam says they will be owners of the house according to their shares. Okay, so the house is worth £200,000, and let's say there are to be 5 equal shares in it. As an example, 2 brothers, 1 sister. So 2 brothers will get 80,000 of the house each. 80, there's 40 left, and the sister will get 40,000. That they will own the house in that proportion now, okay, according to that ratio. Now, what's really important here is that is then the wealth is distributed, they now own it. Now it's up to them what they do with it. Now that if they disagree, it goes to a court of law, okay, but they are now owners. Once you're owners, Shariat lifts its hands and says, okay, now there's a different, now Shariat says deal with each other with love, etc. It's up to you. I am doing makeups and I've been doing so for a number of years. The fidya does not have to be paid. 200,000 is a lot of money and my children will suffer. Ulama say the fidya should be paid. If you don't pay it, unfortunately, I'm not in a position where I hold, forgiveness in my hands. It would be fantastic if we did, right? And we knew if we were forgiven or not. But unfortunately, that's not really the case. So we can only pray and hope to Allah that He forgives us. There's not really much else I can say to that. If you don't want to write your fidya amount in, then and you do tawbah beforehand, and you've actually made plans to finish your salah, but it's just overwhelmed you, and you don't want to deprive your family members, then I'm not too sure what else you can do. Maybe you can do it for 1/3 of your wealth. So let's say £200,000 makes up a half. Do it for 1/3, and then leave the rest to your family. Wallahu alam. This is just, unfortunately, it's a question of forgiveness. And as much as I'd love to say, because of your sincere efforts, inshallah, everything will be forgiven. We have this hope in Allah. Of course, we have this hope in Allah. But that's an answer I think only Allah can give. I can't give. Will they be sinful for not being able to pay all of the fidya? Again, unfortunately, it's a question I'm not really sure. If Allah is happy with your sincere efforts in the dunya to make up your salah, then so be it. But the ulama, the fuqaha have written that when people pass away, they should do a fidya, so that it's a means of asking Allah for forgiveness for the missed salah. But it shouldn't be an excuse to miss salah, if that makes sense. Guys, there's loads of questions. Okay, if a father passes away with a wife and daughters, and has no direct male heirs, what happens? What happens if he has brothers? Okay, this is a specific inheritance question. If you can contact siblings of ilm after, we can give you an answer to this question specifically. I don't know everything on top of my head, the shares top of my head. Will these slides be sent to us? I will leave that to admin to answer. If one is supposed to make up missed prayers to pay fidya, I didn't get that place very well. Make up the missed prayers. You have to make up the missed prayers. That's why I said in the fidya slide that the first effort should be make up the missed prayers, so we don't even get to the fidya stage. Okay, but once we've made up the missed prayers as much as we can, and let's say for example, I've got 1,000 salah unprayed. I made a plan and I'm 800 salah through. I've made qaza of my 800 salah. I've got 200 left, and then I die. Okay, so I've got 200 salah left, I die, then fidya should be on the 200 that have been left. But what I shouldn't do is, all right, I've got loads of money, 1,000 salah, let me pay £3,000 now and I'll be sorted. That's not how it works. You must do qada in your lifetime. You must do qada in your lifetime. And if there is then anything left, then you would make it as part of your fidya. I hope that answers the question. And if there has been misconceptions or misunderstandings because of me, I do apologize. If something happens to parents, who do the children go to? That's up to you. That would be in your guardianship. If a person has willed multiple things, e.g. X amount as a gift, X amount as charity, and the money isn't enough, how would it be distributed? Ratios. Yep, equal percentages, that's how it would be distributed. If my father, many years before his death, when he was well, distributed or gifted aspects of his estate to his brothers or other family members, can my brothers make a claim against his Islamic deed? I think here it's a question of practicality. Who will they go to Islamically? They can go to the court of law, but the court of law is bound to the will. If the will says they should get it and your father hasn't decided to do it the Islamic way, then there's not much you can do. If, however, he wrote an Islamic will where you would get your inheritance and they usurped that wealth without haqq, by violating your rights, then you can definitely go to the court of law and say, look, yes, his will was Islamic and we should have got a share. But if your objection is just an Islamic objection, not a legal objection, then obviously you can cry unto Allah and ask Allah to make life easier for you. May Allah make life easy for you. But unfortunately, I just don't know practically who you'd go to, unless you're living in a Muslim country, who could actually help you Islamically, retrieve that wealth which was usurped. What is a split if you leave behind your wife and 2 daughters, both over the age of 18? Your wealth is below 200k, which includes the house. Again, specific question. Please email us. Email the admin, siblings of ilm. Do they not have to pay fidya if they make up the salah? Yes, you do not pay fidya. So I'll write this down. If you make up the salah, no fidya for that made up Salah. I hope that is clear. I'm really sorry that it seems like I've confused people. If the mother dies, the father is responsible for the kids. If something happens to the father, who do the kids go to? Is it the mother's side? This is a custody question. I'm really sorry, guys. I can't really answer custody questions because I'm not a custody lawyer. And I guess every case will be different based on involvement in family life, ability to raise a child, health of family members, proximity of family members, like even in terms of, you know, where they live. If one lives in the same city, one set of grandparents, and this set of grandparents live somewhere else, then those living in the same city will get preference. There's a lot of things to consider here. This is why you have to go to the solicitors. Right. Thank you for that answer. It seems to indicate that stipulating if it was, but rather mustahab. Is this correct? I had this conversation with some of my teachers, and the understanding is that you should write it. Should is a very vague term in Sharia, because it could mean a very greatly emphasized sunnah or wajib. The way I have understood it, and I am happy to be corrected, and if somebody can find a correction, inshallah, I will happy to be corrected, is that inshallah, to get our forgiveness, we should write it. Okay? What it doesn't mean is that it's wajib to do it, and that if you don't do it, you're definitely going to Jannah, and if you do it, you're definitely going to Jannah. That's not the case. Okay, not according to my understanding anyway. I would say it's highly, highly, highly recommended to do it. And if you did do it, then it's an excuse for Allah to forgive you for those qada. Put it like that. Again, but Allah's forgiveness is up to Him. I hope that answers your question. I was trying to avoid using the word wajib, but I think you pulled me up on it. So that's my answer, that the ulama within themselves kind of are reserved from using the word wajib. But I would say it's very highly recommended. Can you explain as to how we pay fidya? Fidya, fast, fidya of salah, everything is the same. Ummah Welfare Trust, I would recommend, or any other charity you trust, Al-Imdad Foundation, anything really. Can a parent stipulate that instead of selling the house, children put the house on rent and share the income according to Islamic law? But if some children want to put it on rent and others want to sell them, then the parents can't do that. Parents have to make children the owners of the wealth, unless they put it in a trust. Okay, children will be owners; they can do what they like with it. Basically, once you become an owner, you can do what you like. That's just, you know, a general rule. You can give fidya from any amount of your wealth as you need. I'm not really sure what that question means. From the 1/3, yes, you can give however much that is necessary for fidya. Can an individual give most of its wealth before passing away? Not in your final death. If you want to give it away in your health, then fantastic. While you're healthy, give it away. But be fair. We have slides coming up about this, inshallah. If he passes most of his wealth to various charities before passing away and it's not in accordance to inheritance, is there a problem with that? There's not a problem per se, but it should be fair. The inheritance should be fair. Right. Can everybody see my slides? I just want to make sure that I'm on, people can see my slides. I need to see the chat. That's a very good question. Oh, Jazakallah, I can see the slides. Fantastic. Okay, right. Signature of testator and two witnesses. We've done that. Okay, this is really important, right? Because I think a lot of people are, I'd say the majority of Muslims who do write a will and don't consult muftis and ulama are probably making this mistake. So we must be very careful. Like I said, the will, the wasiyah, is 1/3 of whatever is left behind. And 2/3 is Islamic inheritance. That's to brother, son, mother, daughter, father, whatever, right? You don't have a say in those 2/3. Allah has a say in those 2/3, and His Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam have a say. The 1/3 you do have a say in now. The hadith says, Inna Allah qad a'ta kulli dhi haqqin haqqahu fala wasiyata liwarithin. Hadith of Abu Dawud Sharif, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, Allah has given everybody their due right. Whoever was due their right, Allah has given it to them in that 2/3. Okay? The final 2/3. So, members who will benefit from the 2/3 cannot be part of those who benefit from the 1/3. Does that make sense? I'll give you a simple example. Okay, dad has 3 children. Mum's not alive. Dad passes away. He leaves behind 3 children. Son, daughter. Okay, so he says, I have a son who stayed with me and looked after me my whole life. Until I die, he looked after me. He paid the bills for my house. He did this and he did that. Because of this, in his 1/3 will, he writes, so I want him to take double what the others get. Or I want to give him slightly more. I want to give him, let's say, a lump sum. I want to give him £10,000. I want to give him my car. Doesn't count. If your father wants to give to his inheritors, meaning the 2/3 people, if he wants to give to them more than he gives to others, and that would be a valid excuse because one child did his khidmah more, then he has to do it in his lifetime. Not say, oh beta, I will make you the owner now, but we'll do the paperwork later. No, not that, because you're going to create a fight by doing that. Because your son will say, well, dad told me it's mine. And the other son will say, no, but it's not written, the deeds of the car say that it was still dad's. So you're going to have a problem. What I mean by make them owners, I mean literally hand the car over to them, give them the key. Everyone knows it's their car. There's a paper trail to say, I gave this car to son number 1, and he is now the owner of this car. You are allowed to do that, but you must be fair. Very important, you must be fair. We will find hadith on this. The famous hadith of Sayyidina Nu'man bin Bashir radiallahu ta'ala, and we will do. Okay? And the main reason for it is we have to protect the interests of other inheritors. If there are 3 inheritors, like son, daughter, and no other inheritors, and dad wants to give the majority of it to one son, then it's going to deprive the other son and the other daughter. That's why we're not allowed to do that. Okay, it will be disregarded. However, like I answered in one of the Q&As, if the brothers and sisters between themselves, the 2 sons and a daughter, let's say they have this understanding between themselves and they say, you know what, let's all take our shares according to Islam. So each son gets 2/5 and the daughter gets 1/5. Now that they are owners, the daughter and the other son can give part of their money to their brother because they know that he looked after dad a lot. Or they'll say, you know what, you kept dad in your house and dad was part owner of the house. Now we leave the whole house to you now. But that will only happen after they give it as a gift after dad's death. Dad cannot give it from his side. His inheritors can split it amongst themselves as gifts and as EDs, whatever you like. Okay, but within the will, he is not allowed to stipulate this. You must fulfill this wish before death. Now, but dad says that I want to give more to one child. Okay, then give it to him in its life, but make it fair. If there's a specific need or a disability or a debt a child has that isn't their fault, then you're allowed to help them. Without a valid reason, Islam really abhors being unfair with inheritance. Sayyidina Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu ta'ala says that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, "Sawu bayna awladikum fil atiyya falaw kuntum mufaddilan ahadan lafaddaltu an-nisaa." That be fair with your children when you gift them. If I were to give preferential treatment to somebody, it would be to the women. Now, within the 1/3, you are allowed to give that money within the 1/3, the maximum 1/3. You are allowed to give it to those relatives who won't inherit in the 2/3. Okay, now let me give you a simple example. Okay, dad dies, this scenario again, 2 sons, 1 daughter. Okay, now there's an Islamic Sharia principle. If the son is alive, generally, if the son is alive, then dad's brother won't get anything. Okay, so let's say Allah give my father long life with afiyat. If my father were to pass away, I would inherit, but my dad's brother won't inherit. Okay, my chacha, my am won't inherit. So what dad can then do is, within the 1/3 max he has at the beginning, he can then write a wasiyah giving some of that 1/3 to his brother or to his sisters who will also not inherit. Okay. He can give it to any sort of charity he likes. That's completely up to him. He can say, right, give £100 to Umar Trust, £100 to Saint Relief, £100 to Alim Dan, and £100 to Gloucester Zakat Fund, for example. He could say, okay, let's say dad leaves behind £30,000. 20,000 is for family members. At least, it could be more. 10,000, maximum is for his will, for his fidya, etc. He could say, right, 1,000 to each of my brothers and sisters, I've got 5 of them, that's valid, because they are not from the 2/3 who will be inheriting. Okay, I hope that is clear enough. So anybody who has written a will where within their 1/3 they are giving benefit to direct inheritors or beneficiaries, they should change this will immediately, because according to Sharia, it won't count legally, it'll be binding, but according to Sharia, it contradicts the rulings of Islam. Now, this is specifically for somebody who wishes that, or is fearful that their body won't be buried in the right way, maybe because they have non-Muslim family members who have other traditions. For example, I know it's common within the Hindu tradition to be cremated. So if somebody was a Hindu, accepts Islam, and knows my family members won't like that I be buried Islamically, they want to cremate me, then you would sign a statutory declaration, which is a legally binding document, which says that I demand, I wish to be buried Islamically, and the family members will have to follow through with this without choice. Okay, we're at 1 o'clock, so we still have some time. Do you know what you own? Okay, I mentioned this very briefly at the beginning. I would like to clarify. Do you know what you own? I want you to read this slide, right? I'm not going to say anything. I want you to read it, because I think it'd be more effective if you were to read it. And then inshallah, while you do that, I'll answer some questions in the Q&A. Hopefully you read the slides and you understand just how important it is that you know what you own. Okay, there are things that we don't even know, like especially within Asian households. I'm not sure about other cultures, but especially within Asian households where we have like gold, silver, and even when it comes to zakat, people have no idea what they own. Like they might even be claiming zakat if they're living in impoverished countries or in third world countries, and yet they'll have like £2,000 worth of gold chains at home or a gold set, and that means they wouldn't be eligible for zakat. We need to know what we own, because otherwise we're going to create massive fights. I'll try to answer these questions later, now that at 1:30 inshallah. 1:30 maybe we'll give a slightly longer break. Okay, so if we were to die now, do I have all of the information accessible? Do I know who pays the bills at home? Simple question. Who pays the bills? If there's child benefit coming in, whose account does it come in? Who becomes the owner of that? Who is an owner? Are we making the child the owner, or are we becoming the owner? You got to know all of this stuff, otherwise it makes life very difficult. Now, so we've done the will part, right? The 8, 9 or 10 different parts we've done. You'll get a copy of that inshallah. This is just as important as the will. The testator, in case you weren't aware yet, is the person who dies, basically the deceased person's asset and finance identifier. These slides will explain to us how we can identify or keep a paper trail of what we own. So it includes things like money, so cash, bank accounts, shares, stocks, ISAs, £20,000 tax-free allowance ISAs people have, pensions. It includes property, real estate, it includes jewelry, money that you loan to others. Interesting, money you loan to others counts as your money. No, believe it or not, even for zakat. If I let my friend borrow 5 grand, that 5 grand is counted as my money. I have to give zakat on it. Okay. Assets loaned to others, money borrowed from others, that's a debt. My children have to pay off my debt. It's really important. And assets borrowed from others, or bequest to charities, etc., or direct debits. Basically, you have to know your income and your expenditure. This is what the asset and finance identifier is. What do I own? What leaves my account? What enters my account? It sounds complicated, right? So it's just a spreadsheet, basically. It's a spreadsheet. I love a spreadsheet because it helps make things clear, and it should be updated. So every time you become an owner of something new, update it, and just attach it to your will as part of your will. It should be kept alongside the will. A copy from this can be obtained from Islamic Academy of Coventry, their website, or from your solicitor. Within this, you should also make mention of who your relatives are. Okay, those who, the date you are writing from, so in case somebody passes away 2 days after, it's relevant from that date. How many parents, siblings, children, grandparents you have. You're probably thinking, well, but that's obvious. It's not obvious if, let's say, na'udhu billah, Allah save, forgive and protect all of us. Let's say somebody were to be deceitful and were to have a second wife in another country, for example, and has children with her. And the first wife doesn't know. And you might think this sounds crazy. I know a family who unfortunately have been a victim of this, okay, where you have like a hidden family overseas. So the person would need to write it in his will. Maybe then it's a good idea not to let your wife see what you've written in your will immediately. But no, that's a joke, obviously. But we need to make a very clear account of who our family members are and who are due to benefit from us. And then the exact amount, like people are asking in the Q&A, will be given by the local alim mufti when he looks at your family tree and he sees which people you have alive and who cancels who out. Household bills, you should make a spreadsheet with all of these things on. I've probably missed some out. Rent, or if mortgage, Allah save us from taking interest-based mortgages. I know some people are majboor and forced to take it. May Allah drench you with forgiveness and mercy and take you out of the trap as soon as possible. Write down what you're paying, your gas, your electric, your water, broadband, council tax, telephone, TV, mobile phone, car insurance, breakdown cover, car road tax, everything, anything unpaid fidya, unpaid zakat, debts you own, everything should be on this piece of paper. Okay, now debts is unfortunately the dreaded D word. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of keeping a paper trail for every debt, every penny you have owed, and then letting people know where this paper trail is. I, for example, keep things on a cloud, on a laptop, on my phone. I keep it in multiple places. My wife knows where everything is, and she knows my password to it. In the eventuality, Allah protect me, that I were to pass away suddenly, inshaAllah, she would be in a position where she would know exactly who is owed, how much is owed, and when it is due. 3 really important things: who is owned, when, how much is owed, and when it is due by. Okay, I know what some people do, and I think it's a good idea, that at the time of the funeral they make an announcement, or they ask the imam to make the announcement and say, if my father or my mother or whoever it is had any outstanding debts that he owed to other people, please come and see us, we will sort that out. If people owe your granddad money and your granddad hasn't made a note of it, then I would genuinely be very scared if I was the person who owed money but got away because the guy who I owed it to did actually keep a record of it. Even if there's no record of it from the guy who gave it side, if you owe it, you have to pay it. It's as simple as that. You can deceive his family because they didn't have a paper trail. You can't deceive Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said about debts. The Sahaba say, we were sat by Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam one day and he lifted his head towards the skies. Hadith of Nasa'i Sharif. And then Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he, put his hand on his forehead, like you would do in lamenting of source, and he said, Subhanallah, what difficulties have been revealed. And then we stayed quiet, got a bit scared, And then the next day we asked him, we didn't ask him immediately because, you know, some sort of condition and state overcame him. We asked him the next day, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, what is it you're talking about? What kind of difficulty? What type of severity? Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, in whose hands lies my soul. If a man were to be made shaheed and then resurrected, and then made shaheed and then resurrected, and then made shaheed again, and so meaning he didn't get shahada once, he got shahada 3 times, the reward of 3 shaheeds, but he has a debt which he hasn't made any arrangements for, he will not enter Jannah until his debt has been paid. I know people are forced to take debts, okay? That there's nothing wrong if you have arrangements in place and plans in place, but this is really important. Have plans in place. Even if you can't pay it all at once, have a plan in place. Tell somebody about it. The D word is very dangerous, okay? Make sure you pay. There was one Sahabi radiallahu ta'ala, Nabi Sallallahu refused to pray his janazah salah, and then Sayyidina Abu Qatada radiallahu ta'ala said, oh Nabi Sallallahu, how, we won't deprive him of you leading his janazah, I'll take care of the debt. And it was a warning to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, from Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam to the Sahaba, to say, look, don't die without leaving behind arrangements to pay this money. And if it means family have to forego, you know, their inheritance to pay the debt, then they're going to have to forego their inheritance. That's just something that's going to have to happen to save dad. Okay? If somebody says, I can't repay dad's debts, for example, or mum's debts, or anybody's, be honest with your creditors and ask for some additional time. There is great reward in giving additional time. Great reward. Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala said about debts and how dangerous it is. نفس المؤمن معلقة بدينه حتى يقضى عنه. The nafs of a mu'min, the soul of a mu'min, is left in suspension, dangling with his debt until the debt is paid. Okay? Meaning, Ulama Iraqi rahmatullah alayhi writes that Allah doesn't decide whether to save him or punish him until his family pay off his debt or don't pay his debt. So it's very important, okay, that we make some sort of arrangements. And if you feel you are owed a debt and the family member, let's say somebody's died and he owed you lots of money and you're like, where's that money gone? And his family have come to you and they've asked for respite, leeway, extra time, give it to them. The Qur'an says, وَإِن كَانَ ذُو عُسْرَةٍ فَنَظِرَةٌ إِلَى مَيْسَرَةٍ, that if they are poor, then give them some respite until they have some sort of wealth, until they have some sort of prosperity. And that you forgive and give it to them as sadaqah by forgiving it is even better for you if only you knew. If you can do without the money, then my God, forgiving a debt is, obviously Jannat is not in my hands, but based on the Qur'an ayat and the Hadith, forgiving debts is one of the ways to guarantee your Jannah. Like Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says in the Hadith of Muslim Sharif, whoever removes a debt from a person or wipes it off completely, forgives it completely, then he will be in the arsh, under the shade of the arsh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Day of Judgment. Another really beautiful hadith, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says, a person will be brought on the Day of Judgment in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The person will be asked, what did you do in the dunya? The person will reply, Allah, I didn't really do much. But what I did used to do is, I used to, when doing business, I used to let people pay at a later date. I used to let them defer payments so that they could pay me when they had a bit more money. I didn't used to run after them and, you know, like debt collectors and bailiffs do. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will love this answer so much. Allah will say, أَنَا حَقُّ مَن يُيَسِّرْ أُدْخُلَ الْجَنَّةِ. I am more worthy of forgiving and of creating ease. Go to Jannah. And this happened, why? Without much deeds. What did he do? He used to forgive debts when he was able to. Very important. Okay, and I think at the bottom I've written, keeping it simple, you should not be a means of a person being deprived from his place in Jannah. Inshallah, I will give you a place in Jannah. So we don't want to be the ones who deprive somebody else of Jannah. That would be something really horrible. Now, you know what? I think we can finish early. Alhamdulillah. So summary is, a will is vital to ensure your wishes are executed and your family does not fall into unnecessary financial dispute. If you read these slides, this slide, while I answer some questions, there are a lot of questions to answer, alhamdulillah.
Sheikh, just very quickly, if possible, can you read the questions out whilst you answer them? Because the
Oh, other people can't
participants,
see it.
no, they won't see it.
Okay.
If you can just
Okay.
read them out, inshallah.
Yeah. If
Jazakallah.
a father passes away with a son alive, he can make wasiyah for the am. Am means a chacha. Okay, father's brother. But if the son passes away shortly after, so father passes away while the son is alive, the am becomes, he can write him as the first third of the will. Then the son passes away. Okay. Will there be any difference? Then what we will see, what we will have to see in this scenario is, after the son passes away, who does the son have left? If the son only has a chacha left, it literally is based on who the son has left. It could be that the chacha, the am, doesn't inherit even then from the 2/3. But it could be that he does. It literally depends on who's alive at that time. And that's a very specific question, inshallah. Can you enlist in the will how your family members provide for your treatment in case you proclaim as having terminal illness? Yes, absolutely you can. But I would also do that before the will. So I have a conversation in the person's lifetime. So if somebody is in a terminal illness and they might be in a vegetative state, or the doctors have said you might end up in a vegetative state, then you should probably write it or have this conversation before. We need to have these difficult conversations. We hate having these conversations because we hate thinking of death. Now, why do we hate thinking of death? And it's in the hadith. One of the reasons is حُبُّ الدُّنْيَا وَكَرَاهِيَةُ الْمَوْتِ. We love the dunya. We love the dunya and we hate death, so we hate having these discussions. Have these discussions. Put them down on paper, especially in the lockdown and especially in the current circumstances. The current circumstances were enough to wake us up, but the lockdown in addition has given us time to have these conversations with family members. Bilal asks, what if all the other family members, inheritors, happily agree that one inheritor gets more from the will and they do not object to what dad gave as extra? That's fantastic. But everybody has to agree. That's really important. Everybody has to agree. If even one person raises objection, and it can't be done forcefully or through pressure. Okay? Ahmed says, in the hadith about gifts, what did it mean about Nabi Sallallahu preferring to give to women? It means if he gave it in his lifetime, he would give to women, because in those times the women didn't go out to work, they didn't have an individual source of income. So because they didn't have an individual source of income, then naturally, and especially if they were married, for example, Nabi Sallallahu said, I would prefer to give it to the women. Okay, I think that's like Ahmed's asking the question. I thought maybe Aisha, Ruqayya, Fatima have asked that question. Ahmed might be slightly upset by that. Anonymous asks, what about indirect beneficiaries, e.g., daughter may be recipient of the 2/3, but can the 1/3 be given to that daughter's husband, for example? Oh, that's very clever. You know what? I've completely forgotten. You're going to have to ask me this question later. I'll have to check this up. My instinct is saying it should be okay, but don't take my word for it. Let me have a look at that, inshallah. Can anonymous, whoever asked this question, please email info@siblings of ilm, and I'll have that answered for you, inshallah, when I have more time to look through it properly. Can I distribute my 1/3 to my parents? Are they inheritors? No, you can't distribute 1/3 to parents. Parents are always inheritors. There is never a scenario in which parents will not be inheritors of their children. So no, you can't make them as part of 1/3. Unfortunately, what you can do is make them owners in their lifetime. Just to clarify, if a son is alive, then brothers and sisters of the deceased are not inheritors. That is the general rule. Okay, they will be made. The Arabic word is mahjub, covered. They won't get anything. Who is the owner of a child benefit, child tax credit, and working tax credit? My understanding is it goes to the parents to distribute for their children. However, what parents can decide to do is create a separate account for their children and make children the owners. According to my understanding of this, it is based on your practice as a household. Okay, technically, the government give it to use on your children, so you shouldn't really abuse it and use it for yourself. You should only use it for your children. But in terms of legal, legal standing, my understanding is parents are made owners of it, but as like trustees on behalf of the children. What I would do is I would clarify that with a solicitor. Okay, that is just my understanding of it. Happily, inshallah, to be happy to be corrected. If you have a family member who has about 7,000 debt, but they refuse to pay it, they had a business which accrued debt, but business is now non-existent, do their children still have to pay it? It was a business debt. Yes. Unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, the reality of the matter is, even if, listen very carefully, even if the state declare you bankrupt, but you owe a debt, Islamically, that debt remains in your account. You must pay off that debt. Why? Because somebody has lost out. That's just the pure, simple. You can't owe me 20 grand and then claim bankruptcy. What happens to me? I'm still owed £20,000. So Islamically, legally, you might be absolved, right? And you might not be able to open a business for 5 or 10 years, whatever the laws are. But Islamically, even if you are declared bankrupt, unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, you still have to pay off that debt. The estate consists of all belongings. How do you quantify clothes, books, and hence how are these split amongst inheritors? I think practically speaking, what happens is you are made own. Obviously, let's say, for example, I were to pass away. My wife can't co-own my shoes or my socks or my clothes because she can't wear them. There's no benefit in it for her for them. So what would generally happen is either inheritors would come together and decide, look, you know what, you take this, and they'll happily give it because my wife will have no use of it. She'll just give it to my brother and say, you know, when you grow up, you take it. Or they can give it to charity. The inheritors will come together to work that out. Or you can make it as part of your 1/3 of the will, if you like. If the will is signed from 2 witnesses, does it still need a solicitor stamp for it to be legally binding? Very good question, and this question we'll answer at the end as well, inshallah. Jazakallah Kamran for this question. It doesn't technically need to have a solicitor stamp, not technically. However, to save you from paying 40% inheritance tax, to get everything right legally, to make sure your inheritors get as much as they can from your wealth, I would definitely consider going to a solicitor. What my advice is, and this is what I plan to do, inshallah, is I'm going to prepare alhamdulillah, I started preparing mine anyway, but I'm just going to update my will and my testator's assets and finance identifier. Once all of that is ready, and I think, you know what, I've had discussions with my family members, everything I have is on this. After that, I will go to the solicitor, because what I'm then doing is I'm making their job less, basically. If I, however, make them do everything from scratch, it will be quite expensive. So I would say make sure you get a solicitor stamp, even though it would be legally binding. Make sure you get a solicitor stamp, just because it gives you that kind of breathing space. It's safe, okay? And if you do a lot of the work yourself, then inshallah, it'll be quite affordable. I know I will. For most wills is about £250, and then it goes higher and higher. But put it this way, if you got to pay £250, or let's say £500 to IO solicitors or any other solicitors, by the way, I'm not being sponsored by them. They're just the only guys I know who do it really well. So if I have to pay them £500, and because of that, I save 5,000 inheritance tax, then I've won, basically. So you know what? I've still got £4,500 benefit. Anonymous person asks, God, guys, these are loads of questions. Is the sharing of the 2/3 estate the same for a woman who passes away and leaving behind a son with brothers, sisters, etc., the same as the man as mentioned? Whoa. Sorry, I don't understand this question. Can Anonymous rewrite the question about the sharing of the 2/3 estate, leaving behind a son, brothers, sisters, the same as the man as mentioned? I'm really not sure what that means. What I'll do is I'll take a little bit from the questions now, and I'll just finish the summary, so those who want to go can go, inshallah. So the summary you've all read, right? Inshallah, this should motivate you to prepare a will. It is really important. I cannot actually emphasize just how important it is. Storing and updating your will. Once you've written your will, keep it somewhere safe, okay? But somewhere accessible so you can update it whenever you need to. The person who is your executor, you should also, whether it's a close friend or relative, let them know where it is and update it whenever you can. You have to make an official alteration called a codicil or make a new will, okay? And you'll have the same signing and the same witnessing process. Some FAQs. If my family are not Muslim, how do I ensure an Islamic execution of my will? By writing a will and having testators, having trustees and executors who are Muslim, who you trust to fulfill it, and completing and signing the statutory declaration. Can I give more to a family member than is an Islamic share of inheritance? We've answered this, no. If they are from the immediate inheritors, if they are extended family who would otherwise not inherit, you can make them part of your will and give them some money. Should I expect family members to pay funeral expenses? Absolutely not. You've left money behind, leave money behind enough for funeral expenses. If they want to give it from their side, fine, great, but it shouldn't be an expectation. Does it have to be stamped by a solicitor? Like I said, this is best practice. Also get it checked by a mufti. Okay, check it by a mufti, check it by a solicitor, have it stamped. It costs a bit of money, but in the long run, inshallah, it will protect you. Is an audio will valid? No. According to English law, it has to be a written will with 2 witnesses, and Sharia also requires to have 2 witnesses as a high recommendation. The law is different in each country, so make sure you go to the solicitors in your particular country. If you have beneficiaries abroad, like you have a son who lives abroad, then appoint your executors and trustees who you trust to distribute it to them in the most efficient and cost-effective way. The solicitors will cost, I will charge £250 starting at, and it increases, and they prepare a draft for you within 1 or 2 working weeks, inshallah. And if the family is not fair, if the family is not happy with their share of the Islamic will, this is a very important question. Please concentrate on this question. If in my will, I have it signed and I say I want it done Islamically, my children, for example, Allah save, protect all of our progeny. Let's say somebody has children who are not Islamically inclined, and they say, and the daughter says, why should I get half of what brother gets? Right? Because she doesn't accept Islamic laws of inheritance. In English law, she will be able to go to the courts and she will be able to fight. However, let's look at it Islamically. Islamically, it is a dispute against the Sharia. If this woman or a man in a different scenario, mother, sister, brother, father, whoever it is, if they want to take on the Sharia, then go ahead, take on the Sharia. But remember, you are standing up against the Qur'an and the Sunnah. And if you really want to dispute an Islamic will because you want an extra share, then, Allah guide you and protect you, because you're going directly at war with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So although, let's say at the end, the English courts might decide, yeah, actually she has grounds for this, she should get more. The brothers might give you more. You might end up breaking your family, and you'll end up breaking the rules of Sharia. Now, for will templates, you don't have to follow mine, of course. You can check out Islamic Dawah Academy, Hazrat Maulana Salim Dorat's Idea UK. There's a will template there. Islamic Academy of Coventry have a 2nd edition of Funeral Rights in Islam written by Maulana Ibrahim Noor. Consultation legal services, I would advise you use I Will. Just because I know that there might be others, wallahu a'lam. If you do know others, feel free to share on the chat. I don't know others who do as good a job. I know these guys are fantastic. And what fills me with content with them is, number one, their expertise is only in like inheritance and will writing, so they know this inside out, right? And the other thing is they consult ulama, and when they consult ulama, muftis, they do things in the light of Sharia. You know that even if you write something Islamically wrong, they'll be able to guide you. So they're like 2-in-1 solicitors, if you like. So inshallah, this should benefit. Further reading, here you are for further reading. Jazakallah participating. If you want to leave, you can, but there are lots of questions that I'm going to answer now, inshallah. We finished, alhamdulillah, an hour ahead of schedule. I am very, very happy. I'm going to answer these questions, inshallah. Let's say, for example, if you tell people they don't owe you money back, it was only 70p, then does this cancel it? As little as it was, the person wanted to pay it back, but I told them it was okay after it seemed like they forgot. If you said forgive it, if you've forgiven it, then that's it, you've forgiven it, okay? No need to take it any further. And it's only 70p. The reality is the person won't write 70p and they'll be able to say he owed me 70p, inshallah. However, I do say that. However, what I will say to you in addition is, although it's a very honorable thing to do, we should be very very particular with money owed and money due, because we avoid questions and disputes like this. Even if it is only 70p in your case, it might be £100 in another case. It's like, it's nothing, £100. That was when I was rich, and now I'm poor. £100 means a lot. You see the problem? Anonymous asks, if I get it right, Ustad, you said that the money you lend to someone is part of your money. So what if that person doesn't return the money and we have to give to our children after death? My apologies, I got it wrong. May Allah bless you, Ustad. Okay. If we have given somebody money, that is technically our money. Which means they owe it to us, and Islamically they owe it to us. If we count that as part of our will, what would happen if I die is my inheritors should go to them and say, look, you owe dad £5,000. Okay, he's written it, you owe him 5,000, give us that £5,000. Obviously nicely, right? We'll give you his due date was actually next month. We'll give you the whole year. We'll give you 10 months, for example, give us £500 a month, and we'll call it quits. Or you want to be nice, you'll say make it £400 a month and we'll forgive the final £1,000. If they don't return that money, then there's not much you can do as inheritors. You will have to basically deal with what you have at that moment. And then when he gives that money to you, then you will distribute that according to laws of inheritance. I hope that answers your question, whoever that is. Anonymous asks, another anonymous, what if you have a student loan and are unable to pay the full amount by the time you die? You should write it as I think death writes off student loans. If I'm correct, if someone dies, student loans are written off by the government. Written off meaning they don't ask for the money back. If they're not asking for the money back, then there's not much you can do about it. Salams, is there any chance you can put me through to someone at Iowa Solicitor to obtain some further reading material? I am a trainee solicitor. I went to look at this area for my local community in Preston. Brother Mustansir, the website is on Google, iowasolicitors.com. They're fantastic brothers, Brother Rizwan and Brother Harun. And when you speak to them, tell them you spoke to Maulana Abdullah, Imam Abdullah from Gloucester, and inshallah, they'll have to sort you out. I did tell them that because they helped me a lot with this presentation, I did say that I will direct people towards them. So please contact them online. They respond to their emails very quickly. I think it's info@iowasolicitors.co.uk or .com, and they'll respond to you. Normally it's Brother Rizwan who responds from Iowa, but they're fantastic guys, and they also have an app, a free app which we can use to see how much our family members inherit. That might be useful just to see how much you inherit. How easy is it to update once signed so the latest version is verified? If you do it on Word, then you've just got to literally just add a column or add a row. So it's very easy, inshallah, and then just re-sign it. If one has a student debt and the government says it will be cancelled if not paid by death, is Islamically still considered as an owed debt? My understanding is no, because there's nobody demanding that money. In the scenario that I gave you about bankruptcy, there is somebody still at the other end who wants the money back. But if the government have basically forgiven it, then that's it, it's forgiven. However, again, might be worth speaking to a solicitor about that one in case the laws have changed, especially with the way they're pumping money to the NHS and everything right now, which we need. They might change laws like that, so it might be worth speaking to them. A friend's husband passed away and she had no children. I think I should write a book for Brother Kamran, mashallah. He's asked about 30 questions today. A friend's husband passed away and she had no children. At the time, she said everyone agreed that she can keep the wealth from the inheritors. Wait, sorry. A friend's husband passed away, and at the time she said everyone, they want their portion of cheese. What should happen? What should happen? Oh my God. Come on, I really wish you asked this question earlier, because it would show people the importance of actually sorting out the will. So what happened in Kamran's example was somebody said that when their husband passed away, it was a woman, when their husband passed away, the husband's extended family told her that you can keep all the money, but now 2 years down the line they want their money back. Technically, if there is no paper trail and there's no guarantee, they said it could just be her word against theirs. If she actually knows that they forgave it, then she should speak to them, try to get an alim involved, try to get somebody involved to arbitrate. And if she's just making, it could just be her word against theirs. There's no way we'll know. And unfortunately, it might just become a legal dispute. So it just needs people to be Allah conscious, that Allah is watching me. What should I do in this scenario? There's not really a lot I can advise there, Kamran. It's about how Islamically inclined both parties are. Money owed to a deceased, can it be given to their inheritors? It must be given to their inheritors. It must be given. Give it to the executor, the trustee. Find out who the executor, the trustee is. Give it to him, and he will distribute it. If you have a mortgage to pay and has not been discharged at your time of death, does this debt need to be paid off through your inheritance first? It depends if your family want to keep the house, number one, and number two, the immediate monthly mortgage will need to be paid. But after that, get in touch with your solicitor and get in touch with the bank, and the bank will advise you about the steps forward you can take. Okay, obviously they will have prepared for something like this. Work provides a scheme where a listed beneficiary is given a lump sum in the event of death in service. This would go to one person who may also be a beneficiary, normally the spouse. Would this be part of the deceased estate, or does this fall outside of the estate? That is a very good question, Anonymous. I didn't even know this kind of thing existed. Zach will bring it to my attention. Inshallah, I'll have to add it to the slides when I speak to a solicitor. If they give it to one, what I would suggest that we do is we tell them that the deceased has a trust, and they give it into the trust, and then the trust is distributed Islamically according to obviously our inheritance laws. If it is a case where it has to go to one and they say we're not going to give it to a trust, we're only going to give it to his wife, for example, then technically if he didn't own it before his death and he didn't give that money to somebody, which means he wasn't owed the money before his death, then technically it's a gift from them. And if it is a gift from them, then they can give it to who they like. Really, it's all, the wording is very important here. Understanding what the wording says. And I would definitely recommend speaking to the place of work and speaking to the solicitors involved. Inheritance allowance between spouses, go through details. £650,000 is what's shared. So what I would recommend is use as much of it as possible within when the first person dies, and then the remaining with the second person. There's also an additional tax-free allowance for each child. I think it's 125,000, 175,000 per child for direct descendants. So keep that in mind. I would speak to a solicitor again about this. Okay. Again, this PowerPoint was more like a guidance. It wasn't meant to be the be-all end-all. Forgive me if it came across like that. It was meant to be like advice and guidance. I would definitely go to a solicitor to confirm your specific scenario. If an individual decided to give from their wasiyah to charity, but there are poor family members below the nisab, can you divert the charitable funds to the family members as it will be of a higher benefit for the deceased? Unfortunately, if the family member, if the deceased person gave a very specific will, then you would have to find under standard provisions, look there according to the legal law and see if you're allowed to give it, give the inheritance elsewhere. But usually what happens is if they've been specific with it, then you'd give it to whatever they're specific with. And they should, unfortunately, the reality is they should have given it to that family member in their lifetime. Or they should have made them as part of their will. You're not answerable for that. So do as they say, basically. Ustad, what about state debts? Student loans, bank loans, overdraft, video inheritors have to pay this. Again, if it's forgiven is a keyword here, then no, because there's no longer a debt. However, if the state expect the money back, then yeah, they'll have to pay it. Can you share your spreadsheet? Abu Muhammad wants me to share my spreadsheet so he can look at how much I earn and how much I spend. No, astaghfirullah. I can share the template, inshallah. It will be, I have given it to the admin. I'm happy for them to share it with you. We'll see if they share it with you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for all of us. I'm happy to share that, inshallah. If my child dies who is 13, how does this money get distributed? She already pays zakat on it. If you've only got one daughter, again, I'm sorry, sister or brother Shaz, it all depends on how many family members you have. If she's under 18 or under 16, then your trustee or executor will be responsible to looking after the money for her, maybe putting it in a trust, and that's what you might decide to do. And then when she becomes 16 or 18, she'll then be given that money sporadically, as and when that your executors decide to give it. Anonymous asks, how would you calculate the 2/3 estate for a woman who leaves behind a son, but she also has siblings? I'm sorry, this is a specific question. Like I said, I'm really sorry, Anonymous. If it's a specific question about specific family members, you will have to email me after this and I will tell you the amount. Unfortunately, on a Sunday morning, my brain isn't that thing that I can I give everything top of my head. Allah forgive me. How does the government know there is a will after the person has passed away? Because it will be signed, and the executors and trustees will speak to the funeral directors and go to the solicitors. The solicitors will sort it all out, inshallah. Especially when stamped by a solicitor, that's why I go to a solicitor, Kamran. Can you share these notes and slides with other people? That is an answer I will leave to Mawlana Huzaifa. I hope you're listening, Mawlana Huzaifa. Anonymous has asked at 1:26 p.m. if we can share the slides with other people. That is absolutely up to you. Up to Mawlana Huzaifa, not up to the questioner. So it's completely up to him. My father had borrowed money from his brother. His brother forgave the debt. Okay, this is long. My father had borrowed money from his brother. His brother forgave the debt, but now that my father is financially well and wants to pay back, his brother refuses and told that he forgave him for the debt. My father really wants to pay back the money because it was a huge amount. What can be done? Can we give the money in charity in his brother's name? If your father's brother, if your chacha, your says, I don't want it back at all, it's absolutely forgiven, what you could do is, you could, like you say, give it in charity in his name. Absolutely, you can do that. You could also post it through his letterbox. Like you can transfer it to his bank account if you want, and give him. If your dad really wants to give it to him, then he can do that. If your chacha, that he'll get angry if you do that, then yeah, absolutely give it in sadaqah on his behalf. That's if it's absolutely 100% forgiven. I would get that in writing, to be honest. What I'm hearing is that if my son and daughter agree 50-50 on my death, then it's okay, but I can't stipulate that because it goes against Sharia. That is correct. Okay, that is absolutely correct. In your lifetime, you'd have to make them owners of your house. Meaning you'd say, look kids, what's going to happen is I no longer own the house. Both of you own the house 50-50. Put their name on the house, on the deeds. And then after death, you basically, when you die, it won't be part of your estate because they already own it. So then you'll avoid that problem. Yeah, you can do that. But what you can't do is you can't pressure them or pressurize them to share with one another. What you can do is you can say, look, beta, this is how I'd like it. Now it's up to you if you do it or not. And inshallah, they understand and they split it equally between them. But according to Sharia, it's not a requirement. Muhammad asks, what if a parent excludes a child from inheritance on the basis of being their child and the child disputes it, i.e. paternity question? Oh God. So the parent says, he is not my child, and the child says, yeah, but he is my dad. Goodness, this will have to go to court. I can't see any other way that this would be solved. If there's a dispute in, whether you're family members or not, I wouldn't know what to do. You'd have to, I guess, go to a solicitor and go to court. There's no other way I think that could be able to be solved. If death writes off student loan, then does it still apply to other debts, banks, credit cards? Allah give you a long life, Kamran. I was just remembering you. I wondered where your next question will be. I don't know, unfortunately. Allah keep you happy. I know it's the same with student loans, banks, credit cards, Allah knows. Sample Islamic Will template, first ethical, Jazakallah, Ibrahim Bhai, for that. Fantastic. Mariam asks, if the government writes the student loan off upon death, should we still be making an effort to repay it over time? Unfortunately, interest including student loan, so if there is intention to pay, is this correct? Well, I would say student loan in your lifetime, pay it as soon as possible anyway, because it accrues interest. Okay, now in addition to this, if somebody dies, again, it's very important you find out whether the government has if they've forgiven the debt. This is a reality. If it's forgiven, then you don't have to pay it. If it's not forgiven, but they say that, we're not going to force you to pay it anymore, then we should pay it. But it's all in the wording. Like I said, the wording is very, very important here. Right. There are people, sorry, I just opened the chat now, and there are people asking questions in the chat, but I'm not reading the chat. Anonymous attendee asks, one thing that I'd like to tell attendees is Zakaria has offered to the panelists his services for people who want to create a digital assets list which I think will be very useful, inshallah. Jazakallah zakir for that. Inshallah, we can maybe make use of that, inshallah. When you make changes to a signed will, would you still to gather the trustees and witnesses and solicitor together to re-sign the will? I would recommend that as best practice, yes. So everybody is clear. Everybody is clear as to what was changed and how much was changed, etc. Okay. Jazakallah khair, Ustaz. If a wife owns a house on mortgage and wants to pass on to her husband on her death, if a wife owns a house on mortgage and wants to pass on to her husband on her death, so he will then be liable to pay for the mortgage, is it possible to write it? Absolutely, it's possible to write in the will. Again, have it written by a solicitor, because this is to do with banks. Unfortunately, I will raise my hands and say, when I don't know, right? So I don't know the legalities. I haven't taken a mortgage out, so I don't know exactly how banks work. It's something you'll have to speak to a solicitor about and the bank. If life insurance has been put in place and covers the mortgage, which is Islamic ruling here, the Islamic ruling here is get rid of the life insurance. Anonymous, life insurance, I'm sorry, but before I deliver this lecture on wills, what's important is we try to, as part of my responsibility, is to give some guidance on things like life insurance. Absolutely impermissible. Okay, so please, Anonymous, who wrote the question at 1:34 p.m., try to get rid of it, your life insurance. Question from Mrs. Kamran: do you make a trust or do you put money in an existing trust which is not made by you? Make a trust. Go to a solicitor and tell them you want to make a trust. Make it as part of your will. Okay. Not sure if the question, are you the payment to spouse for death from work may be related to life insurance? Can it be part of a package that many employers offer? If it's not part of life insurance, but it's just a gift after death, then it's a gift. If it's, we see, it's really important to check the wording. Is the money being given to the husband or to the family members? If it's being given to the family members as a gift, then the laws of inheritance won't apply. Islamic inheritance. If it's being given to the husband's estate, then the laws of Islamic inheritance will apply. Okay, so it's very, very important. In a situation where you are in debt to a deceased individual, would it suffice for one heir of the deceased to forgive the debt, or do all their heirs have to agree? You are in debt to the person who has passed away. Every heir of the deceased will have to agree to forgiving you. Every heir, unfortunately, every every inheritor will have to forgive you. If one disputes it, you will still have to pay that debt. Is taking life insurance permissible? Absolutely not. Forgive me for my ignorance or lack of understanding. If I own in my own right, say a house, car, or have cash which I have give as a present or gift in my lifetime to whomever I choose, does that come within any assembly, or is that within my own prerogative to do so? Within your own lifetime, give money to who you want. Okay, but be fair. Islam says be fair, like the hadith I told of Nu'man bin Bashir and the other hadith of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam saying, Sawu bayna awladikum, be fair with your children. Be fair. Give the money to who you like, but don't give so much to, like, in charity or to causes where, for example, your children are left begging after your death. Okay, so give in a fair amount to who you think deserves it, but leave enough behind for your family, like Sa'd radiallahu anhu was told, so that they don't have to beg people. Anonymous asks, I'm a sole director of 3 different companies. MashaAllah, Allah grant you immense barakah, immense barakah. When I pass away, what happens to these companies in terms of inheritance? Directors are not allowed owner. Oh, sorry, directors are not considered owners of limited companies as far as I'm aware. Very interesting. This, you'd have to go to a solicitor for this. From my understanding, the trustees and executors will be given rights to continue your business. That is what I know of trustees and executors. But you will go to a solicitor, inshallah, and especially a will solicitor, and get more advice from them. Allah grant you barakah, brother. Anonymous attendee, since in Islam there are specific percentages for every inheritor, will properties be valued and calculated at the time of testator's death, or will it be valued at the time of making the will? Very good question. At the time of death. Okay, because it's only relevant at the time of death. Even if you, let's say I write my will in 2020, right? And house prices are still, they're still quite high in the UK. And my house is valued at £150,000. After the crash, let's say Brexit brings a crash in house prices, my house is now worth 130,000 in 2025. When I pass away 5 years later, it's now only worth 130. If I valued it at 150, it doesn't mean anything in 2025 anyway, because the only thing I can practically get for it and give out is 130. So it would be at the time of death, or when you go to sell it, if that's a few months after death. Okay, hope that answers that question. Hypothetical question. If there is a pre-agreement between all parties for a difference in inheritance in share, meaning if there are two siblings, brother, sister, and they agree 50-50, then the will is drafted under this agreement. Is this will valid Islamically? No. What I mean by no is, Islamically, they will still be given their portion, 2/3 and 1/3, but after that, the son will then be fully permitted and even rewarded for sharing that money with his sister as a gift. What is a ruling between step siblings? It depends if it's alati or khiyafi, meaning if it's sharing a brother or sharing a father. If you share neither, okay, then the person won't inherit. Otherwise, if you're sharing one or the other, then it depends on the specific case. From the 2/3 inheritance, what's the recommended amount for parents? Recommended amount of parents, by that if you mean the Sharia stipulated amount, then it is, give me a second, yusikumullahu fi awladikum, 1/6 or 1/3 for parents usually. Okay, but again, every situation is different. I can't emphasize that enough. RE life insurance, if the family member is adamant to keep it, may Allah grant them hidayah. Ameen. What should the family members do in this scenario? Consult a solicitor and make dua for them. Make a dua for them. I would go to a solicitor straight away. My sisters are mahjoob as I have children. Okay, meaning what he means is my sisters don't get money because he has children and wife and parents. Can I leave money for them from the 1/3 of my will? Yes, you can. Yes, you can. If they don't directly inherit, then you can leave money for them in the 1/3. Please have the question answered. Ari, if we can share the slides to those outside this meeting, others I would assume there is no obstruction in this, and we have permission. Mullah Huzaifa has actually answered this question. He said that we don't want the slides shared without context. So please don't share the slides as they are. The slides and the whole presentation will be available on YouTube, which gives context. So my speech will give context to the slides, and I think that's very important. So please, Anonymous at 150, don't share the slides just like that. It has taken 57 slides, as you can imagine. Probably took me about 100 hours worth of work. I don't want then that work to be manipulated by somebody or misunderstood, etc. So we plan to put it on YouTube with my comments, and if there are corrections to be made, inshaAllah, I am more than happy to make corrections. We are all human and we all make mistakes. Brother Kamran asks, a father left the house to children. They all agree that one son can take the house. A father left the house to children. They all agree that one son can take the house and pay the others the value of the share. Will the value be calculated at the time agreement was made, or when they brother living in the house decides to pay, keeping in mind that the value of the house increases over time? It's interesting you say that, because it could definitely decrease with the crash because of coronavirus and because of Brexit and the high levels of taxes, and I guess inflation rates will have to be lower as well. So it did not necessarily they'll increase. It will be the value of the share when they sell the house. That could be the only thing, because you got to understand here, Kamran, that if in January I valued the house at 150 and in June I distribute it and the house is worth 140, but I've promised everyone their shares are according to 150, where am I going to get the extra 10,000 from? Okay. Kamran says they're not selling the house because the brother is living in it. Then the day they decide to share it, that's when they do it. Okay. What if the father we share amongst the step siblings owns the house? It all depends on your individual scenario. iPhone at 151. Depends how many step children there are, what their relation is to the father, etc., etc. Okay, and which other family members there are. Please email us for more details that I'll give to you, inshallah. Does an adoptive child has the same inheritance right as your own child from birth? No, adoptive children don't have any rights in inheritance because they are not your blood children. You can make them inheritors as part of the 1/3 that you decide to give. Jazakallah for everybody for coming. Jazakallah for attending, taking out time on Sunday. Alhamdulillah, we finished slightly earlier, although we didn't have the second break as promised because everybody just went ham on the questions and answers, which is absolutely fine. Jazakallah to siblings of ilm. And if I have made any mistakes, they are from me and from shaitan. And if anything is right, then it is solely from the tawfiq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah grant us more tawfiq. If anybody wants any help, feel free to contact me directly. If you live in Gloucester, then you know where I live, you know which masjid I'm an imam at. Please come to see me. I will be more than happy to speak to you, try to guide you, put you in touch with somebody who can help you, inshallah. May Allah keep us all happy, guide us, keep us united in this dunya, keep us united in the hereafter, and relieve us from this difficulty that has afflicted the ummah. Somebody's asking when they can come around for tea. Unfortunately, you're anonymous, so I don't know who you are, so I can't call you around for tea. If you tell me who you are, maybe I can call you around for tea. Allah reward you, Allah keep you happy. Jazakallah khair. I would like to give a massive appreciation to Maulana Huzaifa from Siblings of Ilm. Do a fantastic job. Please, I hope this slide or these slides, opened your eyes and gave us some guidance. Stay in touch with Siblings of Ilm, and inshallah they will be putting on more courses. So Jazakallah khair for attending. Forgive me for anything I've said wrong, especially Brother Kamran, who mashallah asked half the questions. Mashallah. So I think Brother Kamran owes me a cup of tea, whoever he is. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us all happy. Ameen wa akhir da'wana. And alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Subhanallah bihamdi. Subhanaka Allahumma bihamdika. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta. نستغفرك ونتوب إليك وصلى الله على النبي الكريم.